Hey there, I'm Vickie Howell, and welcome to episode 4 of Craftish. This episode is sponsored by Kitterly, carefully curated knitting and crochet kits to make anything. Have you been over to their site? It's pretty beautiful, I have to say. They have tons of kits from really great artists, knitters, designers, yarn companies like Tin Can Knits, Tiny Owl, Amy Herzog, and as of today, April 12th, yours truly, me. I'm so thrilled to announce that launching today are my lunch hour knit kits, which is just a collection of 4 kits that I designed to be cool and accessible and really fun to make. It's sort of my overall gig to make yarn crafting or just being creative in general completely accessible. I totally get how busy we all are, and that finding that time, that really important time to be creative, seems a little bit unrealistic. Well, I have got your creative back. All of these kits, there's 4 of them, like I said. There's a patio cafe cowl, a happy hour hat, oven mittens, which actually have nothing to do with ovens at all. I just like a theme, and a market run bag. They're all designed to be able to be made in a handful of lunch hours or less, so that not only are you going to have an adorable accessory once you're done, you're also going to have a feeling of accomplishment and just kind of be able to remind yourself how cool you are because you made something out of string with your hands and it's awesome. So the other cool thing is that Kitterly is offering a special discount code for Craftish listeners. So if you go on to kitterly.com and you place an order for any of their kits, of course, I would love it if you bought mine, but any of the kits that they have, and you put in the code Vickie20, that's Vickie, V-I-C-K-I-E 20, you'll get 20% off. So be sure to take advantage of that and give it a try. I think you're really going to dig it. They also have a monthly kit club that you can join too, and so you pay a monthly fee, and you get kind of like all these new like surprises and cool kits too, which sounds super awesome as well. So, anyways, give it a try. Today's guest is Gott Warner. She's the executive editor of Creative Knitting. She and I have known each other probably for years, just on kind of a work type level. I'd done some stuff back, in the past for her magazine, and we'd kind of, crossed paths here and there. But it wasn't really until the Craft Yarn Council had a meetup in Austin, and I invited her and also Trisha Malcolm from Vogue Knitting and Karen Strom, who at the time ran the Needle Arts department at Interweave. I invited them over to my house, and it was over many, many, many bottles of wine on the patio amidst, an acre of land in Texas, that we all really got to sit down and trade secrets and frustrations and triumphs and really talk about our little branch of the creative industry, or ethos, as it were. And so we've stayed in touch since then. I've been a guest on her podcast, and we try to do these kind of Skype sessions where we just meet up and swap ideas. And she's a wealth of knowledge and just a really great person. So without further ado, let's meet Kara. Gott Warner, thank you so much for being on Craftish. It's good to talk to you, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much, Vickie. This is awesome. Thanks for having me.
You have been so supportive in encouraging me to re-emerge in the podcast world, and I truly think of the way that you have approached your own podcast, Power Purls, has sort of raised the bar for, at least in the craft genre, for how at least the business side, how you've approached promoting and being on top of everything. And I so appreciate you as both a friend and also just as a colleague. So I wanted to say that first.
Thank you so much. That's very nice.
And we will definitely, I want to talk about your podcast, and I want to talk about your many other amazing projects that you're working on in a bit. But I wanted to start because you and I have had the benefit of having many awesome, creative conversations over the past, especially the past couple years. But I came across something when I was sort of going over notes for for our chat that I had not seen before. It was in your bio. It was something that you said, and I wanted to read it because it spoke to me, and I'll talk a bit about why it spoke to me in a second. So you say, looking back on my life, I see an interesting configuration of stepping stones. And by looking back, I can see that they have all been placed there for very specific reasons. And that so resonates with me because I have a truly random career path, at least. You know, I'm now sort of this like DIY personality / author person, but when you look at my entire resume, it's pretty random, you know, working in the entertainment industry. And then of course we all had teenage jobs and we all worked our way through school or whatever it is. And I think about all the time how, man, because I was a waitress for a while, I know that I can make a human connection by just placing my hand on their shoulder because your tips would go up if you made that like, and that benefits me when I'm at conferences, or because I, you know, worked for an agent in the movies and miniseries packaging department of a talent agency. I got to hear on a daily basis how people would pitch themselves for projects. Well, I use that skill every single day of my life when I'm now as a creative entrepreneur. And I could go on and on and on. And if anybody saw that resume, they would never in their entire life think like, oh, of course, this is a track to this.
Yeah. I don't know where you found those words. I remember writing them. Trust me.
They're on your about page.
Yeah. Oh, right.
But one of the main reasons, well, probably the main reason that I wanted to do this whole podcast was for those two things, for what I've just shared with you, why it resonated and what your own words were, that we are in this sort of creative community that for you and I, you know, is very focused on the fiber arts, but it certainly extends to anybody who makes a living or just lives creatively in any respect, writing, you know, music, film, whatever. But what I've noticed over the years through all of these wonderful relationships that I've created is that there is not a track, there is not a direct pathway, you know, and there's always exceptions. Of course, you can go to school and get a degree in graphic design and then become a graphic designer, and then, you know, you can build on that. But so often I've found what's fascinating about the group of people that I consider part of the overall creative community is that it's like a zigzag pool of experiences. And I wanted to know, I wanted you to speak a little bit on that as it applies to those words that I've just read.
Wow. You really, yes, this is quite a surprise. No, not really, but it's really making me think. So yeah, about those stepping stones. Yeah, it is a zigzag. I mean, it was totally a zigzag for me from the beginning. And
well, let's talk about your beginning a little bit. But you know, I threw that at you, and let me put it this way. So Some of the things that you've done for listeners who, because this podcast is not just for knitters and crocheters and people in the general craft industry, I'm hoping it'll reverberate across the creative realm. You have a background in illustration, in knitwear design, in fitness training.
Yeah.
Fill in the blanks and talk about how you see them as a stepping stone to where you are now, which is, you know, you're the executive editor of Creative Knitting Magazine. You're hosting not one, but two podcasts, one specifically knit related, the other not, and whatever other projects you want to share.
Wow. So yeah, where can I start with that? So yeah, about the kind of the beginnings. You mentioned something. Now I'm sorry, I'm kind of losing track here. The zigzag.
Well, you say
gosh.
You say that you see them as stepping stones. So talk about that. Talk about how would being a fitness trainer and being an illustrator be a stone to step you where you are today as a successful editor and executive?
Yeah. That's because you mentioned the illustration part, and I was like, okay, yes, that was a big one because it sparked this idea for me. Back then, I knew that, just focusing on the knitwear side of my career would not fully pay the bills. Just kind of keeping my direction in that, my focus on that. And so I knew that if I were to, kind of put my feelers out there in many different areas, and illustration was, definitely one of those, that I could be, I like to, I've coined this term, a scrappy creative, or a scrappy designer, if you will. And, basically marketing myself at the time, I had this skill as an illustrator. I had actually a degree in illustration, but I had this passion for knitwear. And so I decided that I would become known as a technical illustrator in knitting and crochet. And that I would be able to kind of jump into any project without much help or much reference. And so kind of create this very custom kind of persona for myself as an illustrator in the knitwear realm, because that's where I really wanted to carve out this space for myself.
So technical illustrator meaning charts, or meaning the line drawings of hands that would demonstrate?
All of the above.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started doing some schematics, and then, I got hooked up with publishers and like Sterling and Lark and Random House. And, and I remember, I thought, hey, I'm just going to jump in and put together some, illustrations that would fit. I studied some of the books that were out there at the time. This goes back to, the early 2000s. And I just pitched myself to different editors. And that's pretty much how it started. I mean, I made that, bake that cake, if you will.
Yeah.
I decided that if I wanted this, I had to actually create the job myself.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so that's kind of where I went with that. And so that was one kind of, avenue that I focused on. And then, so the fitness training and, I've done everything from, spin, like cycle, not to be confused with the yarn, spinning of yarn.
Oh, good point.
Even though I do that too. Mm-hmm. So like cycling, and I've always considered myself to be creative in whatever I do, even if it's like in the gym or when I was working as a fitness professional. But if there's one thing, and you've said this about yourself too, and I consider myself I've always been this encourager. I've always been a coach. I've always been in the trenches with those people that I work with. And then, with creative knitting, it's the same way. People will say, oh, you're the expert, and I always feel funny when people say that, because it's like, well, hey, I mean, I can relate, to the audience, because I feel like I'm in the trenches with them. You know what I mean? And I'm there to be the cheerleader. And I think that that's a really important place to be. And I know you totally relate to that.
Don't you think though? I totally get what you're saying. That word expert sounds so finite and kind of intimidating, but in the same way, I kind of think of it as sort of this term that gives people permission to look towards you. And then once you have that glance, you put creative eyes on them, and you guys can be in that same zone together. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't see it as an end-all, be-all term. I see it as something that gives you sort of that, like, credibility to then open the doors. I want to talk a little, you mentioned really quickly, I'm really interested in this. You said something about how you even approached your fitness training creatively. What does that look like? What does creative fitness training look like from your perspective? Is that just the way that you presented it, or was it a mindset that you got into?
I think it was a combination of both. I mean, I can get bored really quickly with things, in the gym, in my creative life. I mean, I always have to kind of mix it up and change it. And so when I'm at the gym, even now, it's like, what am I going to do today? And I just because I've been doing it for so long and working with people, and also my training myself, so to speak, I can pick from, kind of like a plethora of different types of, routines and exercises, and just sort of whip up something, because I cannot just do like the same old thing. And I tell you what, if you want, as far as what does that look like, I'm a really big fan of circuit training. And I did this with clients, and I do it all the time myself, where it's like, you're just nonstop, like today, I'll give you a perfect example. I was on the spin bike, and then like I did like a split routine where I got off every like 5 minutes. So it'd be like every break of a song, and I would do like push-ups, and then I would do plank, and then I would do, deadlifts and squats, and, and I'm always trying new things. Like, what if I do this? What kind of muscle will that hit? And you could say it's almost like the same thing when it comes to, what I do in the magazine or what I do even as a designer, because those are my beginnings. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what's so unique about being an editor of a magazine in a creative space, because most editors have been designers or makers or whatever, that phrase is now. And so that's, so that applies to all these different areas in our lives. I think it just trickles in, even in the kitchen. I mean, like, I get very creative there too.
So it sounds to me that you're saying that you look for different pathways to get you to the same destination, which is that creative space, that space of fulfillment, that space, whatever you call that thing that we're all grasping towards.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, it's also a fun ride. It's like, if it's a surprise and it's going to take me somewhere else, that's fine too, because I'm still a dreamer, like I still kind of have these like moments of, just imagining if I do something, where will it take me? The mystical experience of it all. I mean, I know that sounds silly,
but does that feel any different than when you're freeform knitting and you create this really cool piece you weren't thinking of, or when you're collaging and all of a sudden you see something beautiful? Is it a different feeling than just that like feeling of imagination of where will it take it? Does that feel different, or does it release those same chemicals in your body? Does it feel as luscious?
Yes, it does, because what it comes down to is it's this in the spirit of spontaneity.
Interesting.
That's really, I think, what it is, because we're talking and we're drilling down more and more. And that's the truth for me. Like, I love that. I love spontaneity.
You know what I find so comical and also fascinating about that coming out of your mouth is that you are such a paradox in many ways, because you're very creative, but you are one of the most sort of like scheduled spreadsheety gals I've ever met. Like, the way that you plan out things, I have never worked with another editor that plans out issues like a year and a half ahead of time. And for me, it brings me anxiety thinking about that much stuff ahead of time. For you, it 100% works, but then you're also able to switch. You have a very planned spontaneity in a lot of ways, and I find that fascinating.
It's so funny that you say that, because it's like a blessing and a curse sometimes. But yes, I love structure too, and that's the. I always called it like this left brain thing is like an asset. That, going back to my early career, like this asset, because I also have a background in finance and in bookkeeping. So that's where that's where that structured, that craving for structure comes in, because I do like to put things in boxes. So it's that right, left brain. And so I knew that I had this asset as a designer and I could use that as an editor, because I could see the big picture creatively. I love freeform. I love spontaneity. But on the flip side, I'm very good at structure and I'm very good at organizing.
So you like to put things in boxes, but you encourage yourself and others to think outside of them.
Yes.
Fascinating. You are a fascinating one. What's interesting? I mean, that is pretty rare. And also, if you can figure out, and it seems like you are on a daily basis, and I know it's always an evolving process, but if you can figure out how to harness both of those things, you have such a one-up on so many creative people, especially creative entrepreneurs. Not necessarily people that are just, living creatively, and that's not necessarily what they do as a profession. But artists in general, crafters, creators, makers, often have a really hard time with the business side of it, the promotional side of it, the side that takes a little bit more structure. And so if you sort of have the gift of being able to tap in to both of those very different skills, that really sort of puts you in a place that is way apart from many. That's wonderful.
It's so sweet of you. I like to think that I do have that ability, and just having been, self-employed myself before, working for Creative Knitting, I, when it comes to being a marketer, and kind of getting my feelers out there in many different ways, that's another creative thing, just creative marketing, and how can you dig into one little tiny thing about your business and just kind of explode into these other areas. Mm-hmm. There's so much in there. And that's the thing that I do talk a lot about on my podcast, Power Purls, and with designers that I mentor and talk to. It's like there are so many different things using that creative ability, that that part of you. And then when I see that structured side I definitely see it in entrepreneurial designers, where they have the creative side, but then they have this other side. It's sort of like what I said before about structure and putting things in boxes. They can use, like you said, harness both or commingle both together to create this like magical formula, And if you can recognize that, which I feel like I have myself personally, but saying this to anyone out there listening, being able to recognize what that looks like for you is extremely powerful thing.
Well, I think you kind of just laid it out for people in a way with something that you said. And you said you approach your interests and you your business, and you dig into it. And you can't see her hands, but she's kind of like moving one to a side and then moving another, like she's moving over the cobwebs, right? So if you can approach business, something that seems sort of maybe boring and mundane, when you're a creative type, and you can look at that as if it is an experience in and of itself, perhaps then you can use your creative side to explore that, and then it'll feel a little truer to your own pathway.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I like to make things and start things, like start programs, and I get excited. And I think that designers are the same way, where I know my fire is in that, for, the design like concept, right? But then after that, and I'm just speaking again from that business side, delegate it, hand it off to somebody. Like if you are working in a company too, treat that like a business. I mean, that's what I do at Creative Knitting. I mean, right now I have a big project that I'm working on, and I'm at the helm of the marketing piece of this project. So like, who can help me that would really love to help in this respect and do it better than I could, and then it's sort of like, how can you partner with them? You know what I mean? Yeah. To get them on your team. And so, because, you can't do everything yourself, and you might as well capitalize on your strengths. That when people say, oh, work on your weaknesses, I mean, that's BS. I'm sorry, because I think, sure, it's a good idea to, see if you can develop some of those weaknesses if you can. But, the truth is that you capitalize, you focus on what you're really good at, and the things that maybe you're not so good at, you try to see if you can get somebody else to help you do them.
Yeah, I think there's a certain sort of strength and powering and being empower in being able to identify what aren't your strengths and being at peace enough to know when it's the time to let them go, so that your power, your focus can be more enraptured with the success of your strengths.
Mm-hmm. And there's a really cool book, actually. It's called Strengths Finders or Strength Finders. I don't know if there's an S on the end of strengths, but it's by Tom Raith, I think. Anyway, Strengths Finders, and it basically, it's a really interesting book, and you take this like little online test if you buy the book, so the test is free. And I did this, and I was floored. And there's strengths that you won't be surprised about. Like, you'll be like, oh yeah, okay, that's cool. But then it has these like little tips or these ways that you can really focus in on those strengths. And, like mine was like big picture, but then also you're structured,
Did you break the test?
Yeah, right. I don't know. No, but it was very reassuring confirmation, like a confirmation, but also inspiring. And anyway, so just a little idea for anyone looking to figure that out.
That reminds me of those tests that we all took when we were probably in like middle school or high school that to like help you choose your career path. And they were always like so random, the answers, but also enlightening in a way.
Yeah.
So you have like a kind of a 9-to-5 job. I mean, nothing's 9 to 5 anymore. Everybody works at all times, at least as Americans. But you work for a corporation, so you have sort of a traditional job in that sense. So I would love to know what your tools are for sort of keeping your own creativity alive or your own creative spirit nurtured while also maintaining what you need to maintain to be an executive editor.
Good question. Well, my standing desk.
We're back to exercise.
I don't know if I told you about that.
No,
my love affair with my standing desk. Well, I have one at home my husband made, really beautiful, but where I am right now. And then at work, one day I was standing up. I had this kind of makeshift desk that, thingy. And my boss is like, why don't you just get one of those standing thingies, standing desk. And I'm telling you, I don't know. It's something I've been doing for years. And I know you didn't expect me to say this was a tool, but it really does help my productivity to stand at the right time during the day because, there are times you should sit. It's good, So that really does help. I love that. And also creating my environment in my office is dimly lit. And it's pretty. And it has things that I like around me because early on I thought, gosh, there's a part of me, I'll admit, resists the corporate kind of setup with the lights, the fluorescent lights and all that stuff. So hard for me.
Those lights are the quickest killer of creativity I've ever seen.
Those
fluorescent lights.
Yeah, so I said, you know what, that's it. I'm going to create my own environment. And, they think I'm a little kooky in there, like up in my office. They're like, oh, yeah, Kara, But so that's, okay, so the office setup is huge because I think that you have to create an environment that's conducive so that you can create a conduit for creativity. And now that's something I've coined on Morning Cool Down podcast. When I exercise, I consider that a conduit for creativity.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. So so let's see what else. I think the cell kind of like the mindset at Annie's at Creative Knitting is that the editors of their magazine, their magazines are very much running their own business within a business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that they understand and respect that, and there's not a whole lot of micromanaging going on. I feel that, I can look at every issue that I'm going to plan from the perspective of my own experience. What's going on in the industry? What are the trends? Because my superiors look to me as the expert in that field, in the company, and so they let me go. They let me go. At times I've been called a maverick, but
what's wrong with that?
Nothing, right? I think it was once said.
I mean, if it were good enough for Top Gun, it's good enough for you. Let's be honest.
That was on the other night. My husband started watching
it. So good. It's still so good.
It was so funny. Oh, hilarious, But anyway, so yes, exactly. What's wrong with that?
Are you able to then in turn let your designers or your contributors have that same creative freedom that you've been given? Are you able to relinquish that control?
Oh, yeah. When it comes to the design aspect, I have enough to worry about when it comes to the big picture, putting together the magazine. I really work hard to work with designers that are really good, that really deliver the whole package, that get it from a business standpoint, too.
And what is that whole package for you?
Well, the whole package is, delivering an amazing submission that is like the vision. It's like I can see it sitting in front of me, whatever, with all the details.
You mean either like swipes or drawings and then a clear summary? Or do you mean finished pieces?
No. I mean that they're actually in a proposal format with sketches and explanations and swatches and, details about their concept, that they're painting a picture for me so that I can envision in my mind's eye exactly what it's going to be in the end. And also that they're one step ahead of me.
Yeah.
Because I am now looking for more than just patterns. It's about telling the story, a bigger story, through tutorials and articles that, dive more into a pattern because, let's face it, patterns are a commodity. And, I say that all the time. It's a problem because of the free the free patterns have, it's, the industry has taken a hit because of that. And so with the magazine, more and more, I'm looking to designers that can give more dimension. And then, hey, doing your own photography is a big deal. I mean, if you can develop that skill to an editor, I'm just saying
you're having people take their own pictures that are then printed in the magazine?
Only for tutorials.
Oh, right.
Not always, but in many respects, the designers, most tutorials, they're taking the photos.
I just did that for one of my own books. It wasn't planned that way, but we had to fill in some content fast. My book came up 30 pages short. Can you imagine?
Oh, you told me that.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine.
And my husband, thankfully, knows lighting, and he shoots a lot of my videos, so he could do the photographs, and we turned that stuff around within a week. And if we hadn't been able to do that, my book would have had about 12 galleries of the same pictures.
Oh, my goodness.
It's important because there's not the staff, because of where we are with publishing in particular, the staffing is not always there to do all of these jobs. And so a lot of it falls on the author that wasn't there before, especially with publicity. But also sometimes, in like what you're saying with the artistic side, the illustration, sometimes I did my own illustrations. I'm not a drawer. The photography, anything extra that you can bring is going to help your overall career, because editors like you are going to say, ooh, I have a tighter budget, but I know this designer, she can bring it. I know that she'll know how to promote it, and that in a pinch, we can have her do a tutorial if we need to fill space, or X or Y or Z or A or B or C.
It's not just the budget thing. I mean, that is definitely part of it, of course. I mean, it helps. But it's the vision. It's like, if a designer is going to do the photography, showing their hands or whatever, little nuance is in that pattern, right? They're going to do a better job than I am. I have the skill and the ability to do it, but I am the only one right now in the company that will be able to go down there and pose for that and do the step outs. You know what I'm saying?
Seriously?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to creative knitting, I'm it. Wow. As far as editors, the editor, there's no yarn editor and there's no other editor but me. But, I work with people on the outside that I like to say I partner with, just going back to what I said before, the whole finding people to help you do what you need.
Yeah.
And when a designer can deliver, and, they're going to get paid their worth. And then it's their vision and they do an exceptional job, then it's definitely going to be relayed in the right way. And then I, as the editor, as the business owner, so to speak, in this respect, I can focus on the big picture stuff. I can make sure that I'm steering the ship.
Right.
Because that's what an editor needs to do. And I know I've seen many editors get into filling their own holes and doing designs for the magazines and then end up hating their craft. And I design for the magazine every blue moon, but when I do, it's never a garment. I won't do that because I'm not going to grade anything. It's going to be a cowl. It's going to be a hat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's going to be a fun project. Because by the time I get to the pattern, I'm like, why did I do this?
Right. And for the non-knitters and crocheters listening to this, grading is when you have to size a pattern. So it involves a lot of math and a lot of the unfun part of designing in general.
And that's a skill that it's a huge skill that designers, that's the first thing you need to master if you want to call yourself a designer. Absolutely.
Maybe, or if you know that it's a weakness, partner.
No, you're right. Yeah, right. As long as you can, the thing I've seen too is you got to make sure you understand what your tech editor is doing, or someone for sure that they're grading that based on
The
the
integrity of the
silhouette
shape.
that you're,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? So you got to have some ability, some knowledge, but yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely
any
right.
partnership requires some knowledge of the way the other person works or lives or plays or creates. I know for me, anything involving math is really not my strength, and I've spent a lot of time trying to change that. And I've come to a point where, it's like that book, The Art of Asking.
Oh yeah.
Where I just have come to grips with, like, yes, that is something. And maybe when I retire, maybe I'll focus on that just because it kind of irks me, that I can't do everything that I want to do. But at the same time, I'm not doing a service to my overall career or my craft by focusing on something that at the end of the day isn't going to A, fulfill me, or B, make me any money, make my family any money.
Good point.
And so for me, letting a little bit of that control go, and let's be honest, most of the stuff I design is accessories because I enjoy that more. But letting go of some of the stuff that overall, when the pattern's printed, nobody's going to look at that and say, wow, that was graded beautifully. I mean, you and I might, but really they're going to look at the way it's draped, the way it's styled, the stitch pattern, the way that it fits the model. So do the other things matter if you're not getting the notoriety for it? Mm-hmm. Probably not. So finding partners that you can trust to really speak to that integrity of your design, I think is just another smart business move.
Absolutely.
Amanda Palmer's the author of that book, Art of Asking. I was trying to rack my brain for it.
That's a book that I would like to read.
She's the lead singer of the Dresden Dolls, or was. I don't think that they're together anymore. She's pretty punk rock. She's a smart gal. I'm kind of going backwards here, but there was one thing I wanted to ask you when we were talking about illustration. Were you did you draw a lot as a child? Was that how you expressed yourself?
I did draw a lot. I had sketchbooks. Oh my gosh, like since I was 10. And I did this funny thing where I used to write for each of my drawings. On my drawings was my age and the date, like my age and the date, like age 11.
Yeah.
Whatever the date was. And I did that for years and years. And it was always just a part of me. Like I didn't think about it, And then, I went to art school. I went to Parsons School of Design in New York City. And I majored in illustration because I wanted to, even back then thinking like a business person, I need to go into a commercial art field. Yeah. Because initially I wanted to major in fine arts. And I was like, oh, I'm not spending all my parents' money on this.
Yeah.
Being a fine art major, for 4 years, painting in a closet, in a little, crazy
Do you paint?
Studio. I guess you could say I do. With my collages, I don't know if you've seen any of those. Yeah. It's kind of this mishmash or this eclectic mix of everything that I've always loved to do. Because I first discovered collage when I was in college. I was a sophomore in college and I fell in love with it. So anything three-dimensional, and this is a kind of a cool thing that we're getting into because that was the beginning of my love affair with three-dimensional, even though you think collage, it's not really three-dimensional, but in a way it is because there's layers and then I'm adding pieces and I love to use my hands and mush things and spread things around. And so the layer thing and then different mediums and aspects, paint, crayons, markers, paper, odds and ends that I find. And then from there, I started doing 3D illustration. Like I just really got into it. And then I discovered...
Is this through a graphics program or are you physically drawing 3D illustrations?
No, back then, because I graduated college in 91. I think there was one computer in the whole school. Yeah. And this was like a top art school.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello. And it was, it was all by hand. I did it paper. I did it with clay, and Sculpey was my favorite thing to use.
Yeah.
And so I just started that thing. And I didn't, everyone else was drawing with their pen and ink but I was just like, I got to this point where everything had to be 3D at one point. And then, funny enough, senior year, because here I was on this path as an illustration major, and I discovered I wanted to take an elective, and it was hat design. It was millinery design. And then I was like, whoa, clothing, of course, hats, but like the 3 dimensions that you could turn fabric into is something 3-dimensional. And that was it. I'm telling you, I was hooked. And then from there on out, after that, I worked in the garment center. When I graduated, I didn't go into illustration right away. I went into illustration. I started being an illustrator later.
Yeah.
I started in the garment center.
Doing what?
I worked in cut and sew, like accessories, designing accessories. Basically, that was, hats and, different head accessories. And I worked for a couple different companies doing that for, a while. And then I left. And then I went, because I discovered knitting. I discovered knitting again. I learned when I was 12, but I discovered knitting when I was working.
From your mom?
Well, okay, so I'll back up. My grandmother taught me when I was 12.
Okay.
And then I lost interest, like kids can, that can happen. And then I rediscovered it in my 20s when I was working in the garment center. And it's so interesting because this yarn shop was right around the corner from where I worked, and I didn't see it for years. And I just remember working, and boy, let me tell you, I was in that cutthroat environment, crying every day. It was just like crazy. Yeah. And so I discovered this really sweet yarn shop called the Yarn Connection on Madison Avenue, which is no longer there anymore. And I was like, wow, where has this been? So I walk in, and I just got excited again, plain and simple. And
by the materials or just by the garments that you saw?
Well, the yarn, I wanted to find an outlet from, this kind of high pressure job, working in the garment center. And I just went walking one day on my lunch break, and I found this yarn shop, and I needed it as an outlet. You know what I mean? So I saw the yarns, and I was just so excited by the yarn, and I just picked up knitting again. And I took a class, just to refresh myself, make sure I was knitting correctly, and started knitting again. This was like in the early 90s. And so that was it. I've been knitting like a crazy girl since then. And I was determined to figure out how to turn it into a career from that point on. So everything I've done is sort of I've created that myself, And I said, well, I'm going to figure it out. I don't know how the heck I'm going to do it, but I know I can. And just started, connecting with people, which is something that I think I've been really good at, making friends and connecting with people in the industry. And, I consider all of them my friends too, because it's like about building these really beautiful relationships.
I think that speaks a little bit to something I recently taught a live and then online course for Creative Live called Monetize Your Craft. And one of the things that I really was hoping to get across to students was that we have this benefit that many other industries do not allow. And that is that the career in and of itself is also a creation. We have the ability to create whatever that picture looks like for ourselves. Which is not something that you can say if you're an attorney or a doctor or an accountant it's such a fluid, undefined category that in and of itself, if you can allow that to be another creative outlet for yourself, then it may not feel as constricting trying to monetize, put the word monetize on something that's your art, which is very hard for a lot of artists and crafts. It feels, for the lack of a better term, icky. But if you can think of that in and of itself as being a journey or as being a creation, sometimes that helps sort of open up those gateways.
I think so too. And it's also believing that, without a doubt, I mean, this can be hard sometimes, but you just have this faith and this belief that, what you're doing will eventually monetize, if we want to use that word here. Because if that's the case, you're definitely going to see resources appear, if you're going up that road. Because I think that that's really an important thing too, is to, not so much put a dollar sign on something, but just have a healthy kind of outlook about what that, idea of monetizing really is, or what that really means. But I just like to say, don't expect your creative life to pay the bills right away. Let it grow organically. I think that's important. I really do. Because I've seen too many people kill that side because they wanted to turn it into a business. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to say that to be like a downer. I'm just saying, allow it to grow organically, because it's going to flower into something that maybe you can't imagine. Like, I think about my career, and if you gave me a crystal ball and I could see into the future, see all these things that I've done, I'd be like floored, because there is, I like to say there's no blueprint, right? We create our own blueprint.
Yeah, absolutely.
The blueprint of you, whatever that is. And you can create it and recreate it every day, every year, whatever. And I think that sometimes we can get it, stuck and think we can't. I've never thought that I couldn't. And it's not to sound cocky or anything like that, but I just have always felt like I want to do something and I'll just do it. And so it's almost like they become little mini realizations, because when you see yourself accomplish something, it helps you for the future accomplishments, because you're like, oh yeah, I did that and I believed it. I had no doubt. I just wanted to do it. And those little things are like your jewels for the future. I think you have to hold on to those.
Yeah. Look at your own history and thrive on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Kara Gott Warner, delight as always chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Well, thank you so much.
Kara Gott Warner talks more about the passion for knitting on her own podcast, Power Purls. For more info, please check out this episode's show notes page at VickieHowell.com/craftish. Craftish is produced in Austin, Texas by me and mixed and edited by Dave Campbell. Thanks again to our sponsor, Kitterly, the cat's pajamas of knit kit makers. And don't forget to take advantage of that Vickie20 code for 20% off any kit. I'd also like to give just a general shout out to the 32 of you who at the time of this recording had taken the time to review and rate Craftish. Not only does it make me feel all warm and fuzzy inside, I'm kind of pinching myself that they were all 5-star. It also really helps more listeners to be able to find this podcast. So thanks. You're like totally the wind beneath my podcast wings. If you're interested in any of my other projects, please check out my website, VickieHowell.com, and follow at Vickie Howell on social media. My latest book, We Garter Stitch, Must-Have Knits for Modern Babies and Toddlers, is available for pre-order on Amazon. Tune in to the next episode of Craftish with my guest, fabric designer and quilting artist, the incomparable Tula Pink. That'll go live next Tuesday. Until next time, breathe in, craft out.